Hi. I feel like this is the room of my favorite friends. It's really exciting. It's good. Thanks for being here to brave the rain and the traffic. And what else do we have today? Gas leaks downtown in closed cities, delayed flights. But all of those things in mind, and we're here. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking time in your time in Texas to swing by Austin and visit with us.
Absolutely. Thanks all of you for coming as well. I appreciate it.
So I'd like to introduce Jessica Cox with Galvanize, who very graciously is hosting us tonight. Their staff has been amazing. And when I tell you amazing, absolutely amazing, I am hooked on Galvanize. So I know you want to say a couple of words.
That's very sweet, yes. Hi everybody, I recognize a couple of friendly faces in the audience. We're so happy to be hosting you here this evening. Chelsea's such a good friend, and I know this is a very important topic. I just wanted to give you a bit of context on what Galvanize is so you know where you're sitting right now. Galvanize is the learning community for technology. So we really seek to bridge the gap between industry and education, and we do that by bringing immersive education programs in web development and data science under the same roof as entrepreneurs and startups building their businesses. So we really have these two groups side by side that traditionally have existed in separate universes. So we have a handful of really cool companies here. We got a couple of our mentors in the audience, Gary and Steve. So if anybody's ever interested in getting involved, interested in becoming a mentor, hosting an event here, or has a company in mind that you think would be a great fit for the community, please keep us in mind. And I would always love to connect and grab coffee with anybody if you have further questions about Galvanize. But I won't hold up the program any further.
Super appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us.
And then I'd like Kyle Welch to say a few words. We're live streaming this on RCR Wireless and a Connected Brain Industrial IoT 5G.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. My name is Kyle Welch. I'm Vice President and General Manager of RCR Wireless News. If you're not familiar with us, check us out, rcrwireless.com. We have everything from daily articles, use cases, white papers, webinars, long-form feature reports. We've been the leader in media and news covering the telecom industry since 1982, so check that out. Also, earlier this year, we launched our new brand, Industrial IoT 5G.com, and it's a focus on use cases around developments and industrial IoT, 5G, really kind of one-stop resource center for decision makers in the IoT industry. So that's actually really cool. We have Philip Tracy here who's writing a lot of the articles there, publishing those. We have TV shows, webinars, a lot of good stuff to check out. And then finally, in January of this year, we'll be launching our first event on the Enterprise IoT 5G Summit track.
Really?
It's January 30th, 31st, February 1st here in Austin at the Hyatt Regency. We'll have such speakers as Kevin Ashton, who coined the phrase IoT. We'll have a number of breakout sessions, panels, and keynotes really going after IoT use cases. So we're taking a different approach from the event where we're really talking about hands-on, real-world applications of IoT and then the ramp up to 5G as well. So we have a lot of exciting announcements coming out about that over the next few weeks. So I encourage you to go to rcrwireless.com, subscribe to our newsletter, join our social communities, and look for some updates on the event as well as our day-to-day news. So we're excited to have this event and be the broadcast partner with this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun learning about smart cities and such an emerging field, and IoT 5G, industrial IoT 5G has been kind of a go-to for me, so I really appreciate them putting all the information together. So welcome, the official welcome as we get started, and thank you everybody who's joining us on the live stream through RCR Wireless. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Beverly Rider with Ericsson.
Thank you.
You have such a deep history in IoT and Internet of Things, and as smart cities is, I think, in the U.S., a newly emerging area. We have a lot to learn from you, so really excited
Well, thank you.
hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm excited. I'm interested to hear what people want to ask me too.
Yeah,
So,
nice, nice. Well, first, tell us
Yes.
what you know most about you. Tell us a little bit
Well,
about yourself and kind of what Ericsson is up to these days.
I would say that I've taken a zigzag track through my life. It's definitely not a straight line. I started out as an attorney and started helping some of the people in a telecom perspective do their contracts, and I like the sales side of it and the technology side of it better than I like the attorney side of it, so I switched over. People say that I went from the dark side to the light side, so
Nice.
I'm now on the light side because I'm riding the light. I worked for Quest, which was then purchased by CenturyLink. Prior to that, it was US West for 12 and a half years, and I ran enterprise sales for them on a domestic basis. That time, we didn't have a lot of international assets, and when they were purchased by CenturyLink, my husband and I, who was also an executive at Quest, decided that rather than going to work for CenturyLink, we would go out on our own. And I would say it's kind of an odd journey, but within the first 30 to 60 days, my husband had generated so many meetings to go to that even though I wasn't supposed to be part of that business, I became part of the business. And back then it was called M2M, and I just had an affinity for it. I loved M2M. I love anything that you can use technology to make you more efficient, to make you save money, to make life easier, or to make life more fun. So I have an emphasis on the fun, which I think we're losing in smart cities right now, but I'm going to talk about that later.
Not for long.
I hope not. And then just recently, we sold our business, and so I found myself with nothing to do, and Ericsson had a great story about the network society and at the time, it was 52 billion devices, and I decided that that was a ride I wanted to go on, and here I am, and that's what I do.
Perfect. And what was it that attracted you to Ericsson? What about the company? You know, I've been reading the headlines, some on RCR Wireless, about some of the really exciting things you guys are doing with drones and 5G, and what are some of kind of the top topics that are coming through?
Yeah, so Ericsson's a very interesting company because it's a Swedish company. It's very collaborative, and it doesn't matter what level you are within the company to come up with ideas. So somebody can invent a connected water device in their basement and bring it in the next day, and we find a way to make it work. Or we could see, somebody was talking once about the spaceships and how they were going to be hovercrafts and how things were going to drive themselves, and now all of a sudden things are happening like that, right? We have autonomous vehicles. So Ericsson was the first one to do autonomous vehicles with Volvo. That was the very first company to do that. We have a very strong partnership with them, and through that, that's just, I think, accelerated Ericsson's view into what a smart city is, what IoT is, how to help the world with IoT. And our prior CEO, Hans Vestberg, really believed in smart, sustainable cities. He was part of the UN. He's very involved in climate change as well as sustainability, and so that's a key component of everything that we look at within Ericsson. That would be my entry.
How do you define smart cities? It's, I think every time I log on, there's a new definition kind of popping up, and I know
Yes.
cities around the world, it seems like have kind of leapfrogged the U.S., and we're in a little bit of catch-up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it seems like we're kind of defining it on our own terms here in the U.S. How do you define smart cities?
Well, I don't think there's a true definition for a smart city. So I know that everybody wants to have one definition, but every city has its own character and has its own missions and what it's trying to accomplish. So I think every city has its own definition that's based on what the citizens want and what's most important to the citizens. For me, the definition of a smart city would be one where the citizens and the private and public partnerships together are defining that roadmap, and that actually would be a smart city. I don't know that in all cities they're doing it that way, but I think that if we're going to truly have smart cities and it's going to be the best and the brightest for that particular geography, it has to have all three of those components to be a smart city.
It's refreshing to hear that Ericsson, a large corporation, is as nimble and entrepreneurial. Can I
Absolutely.
say that word? Okay,
Yes.
so I don't want to put words where they don't belong. Entrepreneurial in their approach. And I know that cities around the U.S. are really trying to adopt those principles where they're trying to be nimble and welcoming and entrepreneurial, and at the same time be true to themselves as local entities and governing bodies. So what are some of the best lessons learned, or maybe snapshots of cities who are really doing this well, knowing that we're all figuring it out together and there's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way?
Yeah, so wow, I think there's a lot of cities that are doing it the best that they possibly can, given the hurdles that every city has. I think that there are some European cities that I've seen that have really leapfrogged, but sometimes to their detriment, not to as a positive, and then also sometimes where they're doing so many things and doing it so quickly and moving, just stepping 5 steps ahead, that the citizens aren't catching up with them. So there's those types of cases, and then there's also the cases where everything is just kind of coalescing together and it's all working in unison. And I don't know that when you put it all together, you know which way you're going to go. From a city perspective, in the U.S., I actually think Austin is doing a very good job. I think Portland is doing a very good job. For anybody watching me, and I don't mention your city and I work with you, don't get mad at me. Just means we haven't got there yet. There's a lot of, on the West Coast, I think a lot of this started before, than on the East Coast or in the Midwest. So I think that the West Coast is probably highly represented. Silicon Valley will tell you every single time that they're ahead of everybody, and maybe they are, I don't know. And then on the East Coast, I see some cities that really have made market improvements year over year. Every year, if you took a baseline and then you just looked at how they were progressing, New York City has added a lot of different technologies into their downtown core. They've taken lanes out to put bikes in. They've done a lot of things that are really making a palpable difference. I see that in Boston as well. I'm starting to see that in Atlanta. I think Atlanta wants to move that direction. They're just so geographically dispersed, it's hard to do. And then I also see, I know it's my town, but I love Orlando, and so I'm always going to plug Orlando because I think that they're great as well. And then in the Midwest, of course, Dallas and Austin. So, and in 2 very, very different ways, both cities are pursuing that objective.
And are there, I love your point that each city is unique, and some of the largest challenges that we have in Austin, and everybody knows this, right? Transportation and accessibility. We're really going through beautiful growing pains. We're growing leaps and bounds, and our little city is just bustling at the seams. So it doesn't matter if you've been here 20 minutes or 20 years, everybody's kind of in the same boat together. But different cities like Atlanta, Chicago, New York have very, very different challenges.
Yes.
So with that unique kind of flavor for each city, but a common goal, which is to enable our cities to be as tech savvy as possible to solve our city's greatest challenges. Is there a roadmap, or are there best practices? Are there rules? Is it not fair to say the word rules? I don't know.
There's no rules.
No rules.
All bets are off. No rules. I would say, first of all, that there are things that have developed that every city needs. So transportation, parking, bike lanes, or access to multimodal transportation. Those come up in every single city, and it doesn't matter where you're at in the progression, every city is still talking about it. Using technology to make it easier for people coming into your cities. So everybody's first impression of a city is when they get off the plane or the bus, and then from there, they determine whether they like the city or not. But there's just like meeting a person, it's like a handshake, and the airport tends to be the handshake for most people. So I see a lot of concentration on airports in particular. You guys have it hands down. I've never ever been in an airport where I can get a brew and have live music, so I gotta say I'm impressed. But I really find that almost every city in the world is looking at their airport as their entry point and as their handshake to their visitors. And then from there, it's how do we make that visitor experience a good one, in conjunction also with how do we make our citizens. So I'm not talking about the citizen piece right now, but just first impressions and ways that people are a commonality. So I see that as a commonality, which is an odd one, but it's recently reared its head in I have probably 25 different cities wanting to talk about their airports all at the same time.
And does technology play a role in that?
Yes.
Are we talking networks and sensors and smartphones and
everything?
All those integrated
Yeah,
layers?
so if you can take every type of smart device and put them all in one place, they all want to be the best and the smartest and have the most. But they want it in a way that's different. So one city might want it for their citizens to be able to come in and out, so egress and ingress in order to get in easily. They don't want everybody bringing their cars anymore, so they're looking at multimodal transportation. How do you get that information to the citizens? How do you get it back? How do you do parking? Should it be valet? Should it be sensors? Should it be dots? You know, should you have an app that tells you where to go park? Should you drop your car to somebody then that app tells them where to go park? There's all these different modes of that. Other cities, though, want it to be more the entertainment value when you're in the airport, and then others want it to be an ease of charging and billing and be able to do everything you want for the city within that. So you can pay your electric bill, you can, you know, go buy your food, you can buy your ticket, you can book your hotel. In New York, you can buy your tickets for Broadway. So kind of looking at all those different ways. But everybody is looking at their airports. So that's one commonality. Transportation, that's the biggest one. Airports is part of transportation. I always start with that because it surprises people. But for instance, in Portland, they've done a lot of things where they've, you know, already put separate bridges for their commuter traffic. They have bike lanes all throughout. They have share cars. They have bike shares. They have everything shares. And you can actually order multimodal transportation through an app. So they're very progressed, but they're still looking at things now like, okay, if we put sensors on the bikes and if we put sensors and cameras on all the intersections, and if we made counts and we checked out where all the accidents happen, could we provide, when you rent your bike, the safest route from point A to point B? So everybody who gets one piece done wants to then take that piece and make it even smarter and smarter and smarter. So I don't know where the end is, because it seems like every time I think we made it, something else gets invented. Right. And that's the great thing about this, I think, is that every single day it's different. That's why I wake up every day, because I don't know what's going to hit me. I have a project right now where somebody came to me and they said, you know, we have 500,000 of these things and we don't know what it can do. Can we just send you one and can you just figure out what to do with it? So that's, you know, that's a great day.
So you're a part-time engineer too.
I have a great team. Yeah, my mom taught me way long ago that, you know, to hire people that were smarter than you. So I'm not an engineer, I'm not technical, I don't pretend to be. I just have a passion for, I think, more M to M. And then that's just turned into smart cities as well. But I love everything about IoT. I love everything about technology and what it can do to make lives better.
Well, it seems like even on a meta level, we almost have to come together as a community, as a city, as corporate partners, as university partners, and almost agree that we will not find the answers because it will always be evolving, that we have to collaborate and really kind of get messy together and understand that it's a creative process. And do you think cities are ready to hear that, or even universities, or even private sector partners? I just think that it's such a unique opportunity for all of those groups to come together and not just get excited about the shiny things, but also the hard work of developing the infrastructure on which all of this stuff runs.
Yeah,
too.
I think everybody wants to, though.
Yeah.
I think that even though everybody has different objectives and different what we call KPIs in my business, we all have what we're tasked to do, but in every vertical, whether it be public or private or education, I think that in the educational environment, and for those of you that are from the universities, you guys have done this all along. I mean, it's always been collaborative. It's always been sharing of information. It's how you build upon what's already been done in order to get better and better. I think that in the public sector, that hasn't been done as much until recently, and so it's a shift in a mindset maybe. And I think that people who've been in the business a long time just like in any business, have a harder time making that shift. Sometimes they're the first person because they raise their hand, they're like, hey, what we've been doing for 20 years hasn't worked, so let's try something new. But a lot of times, people don't like change. And so when you're implementing change, you have to make it so that everybody in the room. So for instance, if I was doing a project, one of the things that we do is we always do a 360 circle. And I started this a long time ago because I found that if everybody didn't adopt the technology, then the technology wasn't successful. And it actually cost my company like I remember the exact dollars, $254,242. And the reason is that this woman just didn't want to take the new technology and have to walk it across the floor to where it had to go. And as a result of that, she waited 9 months to implement something that her CFO had brought into the business. So for me, that was an aha moment, and I think it's saved millions of dollars for people since then, because now I make sure that every stakeholder, and my team's really into this, we make sure that everybody that has skin in the game understands why they're doing it, what the value to them is. Because they don't care if you're saving money for the government, they don't care if they're saving money for anybody, they care how does it impact me. So we show every single person in the value chain, how does it impact you? And by doing that, they want to adopt, they want to be part of the solution because they feel like they're part of it.
What do you think is the future of smart cities in the US? It's
Boy.
magic wand time, or maybe crystal ball time.
I was gonna say a lot of confusion in the short term. I think that there has to be a diametric shift. And this might be too philosophical, but I feel that a lot of times when I go to cities and I'm working with the different entities, even departments that are like maybe just separated by a wall, and they aren't talking through that wall. So there has to be a shift to wanting to share information, not hold on to information. There needs to be a shift to wanting to work together and not stay in your silo. And there needs to be a shift to adopt change, not for change's sake, which a lot of people feel like a lot of this is just for the sake of change and not actually bringing value. So truly examining each and every solution and making sure there's value in it and that the value is worth the risk. And the risk is that people are unhappy, they become disenfranchised within the process, and then they don't want to adopt. So I would say that's the biggest hurdle. Now, if I could wave my magic wand, I would implement.
You can in this room.
In this room,
Let's
I can.
do it, yeah.
That's kind of fun. There's some great examples of cities that I've been to that are doing some phenomenal things. And for me, one of the things that guides me in smart cities in particular and IoT is the ability to make change for the world and to guide where the world's going, whether it be in a sustainability realm, water, waste, and electricity and energy, they're important causes because they propel savings, they propel longevity, and they propel more resources in our spaces for longer. So I don't know that it's the be-all, end-all, but I do know that for me, that's a really important cause. And so when I'm looking at what I would love to see happen, if I could have the best of the best, I would take components of every single city and I would make a showcase of that. I would there's a fun to Austin. And you've done a lot of phenomenal things and you're way ahead of the curve. So I'm sure everybody in this room already knows you're ahead of the curve. If you don't, you're way ahead of the curve compared to most cities, but you've seemed to put fun into the process. And I think that in a lot of cities that's missing. So I saw a headline somewhere saying, why smart cities, why not, I can't remember the word now, it was like fun. Why not fun cities? Or why not happy cities? That was it. Why not happy cities? And I started thinking about that because I always think, why can't it also be fun? So I don't think it just has to be smart. I think it needs to be fun, it needs to be engaging, it needs to be all these other things in order to bring everybody into it. Technology doesn't have a warm feeling to it. It doesn't make people cry at the end of the day. It doesn't pull at your heartstrings. And the things that really get a group to come together and work together for a common purpose has something that pulls at your heartstrings. So if people can't find ways to bring everybody in, then it's always going to be these disparate projects instead of a full scope, holistic solution, which is what my ultimate smart city would be.
That's such a great point. I mean, tech is almost invisible in our lifetime. We're only really noticing it when it doesn't work the way we absolutely want it to at our command and absolutely convenient. And same way with the city in some respects. I mean, the way that a city operates is just an amazing logistical feat, and they are just all these invisible things that happen that make our lives kind of run. And the only time we really notice it is when it's not working great, because the city has grown very quickly and the traffic is congested, or you have a gas leak in downtown Austin and some roads have to close, like what happened today in our city. So it's interesting that all of these invisible things can now become visible and very, very meaningful, because they're creating a better experience for citizens and the cities that they deeply care about.
Absolutely. But even in your example, right, you have growth and it happened really fast and everybody wanted the growth because you get economic boom, you get all these great things by having growth, but then people are mad at the growth as well.
Sure.
So that's what I talk about the 360 is that yes, you want growth, but you have to plan for that growth, and then you have to suffer the consequence of the growth, but then you work together to solve it, right? Instead of everybody just pointing fingers at each other and then nothing ever gets done.
Yeah. And I saw some of that. I know you were at the Smart City Summit this year in June in Austin.
Yes.
And some great partners for that event. And the Department of Transportation allocated $40 million to a city. There were 7 finalists. Austin was one of them.
Yes.
So we're happy to see that. And in that summit, I really saw cities working together in what I think is a really unique way that I haven't really seen in economic development before. And of course, these are the CIOs, the Chief Innovation Officers, the Chief Technology Officers of the cities, really saying, oh, this is how you approach this? What a nice idea. Maybe we could try that in city, fill in the blank. Are you witnessing that from your perspective as well?
Actually, I think that grant actually motivated people to do that in a much broader way than they had before.
Yeah.
So just for perspective, I've worked with smart cities now for about 8 years, and I've worked with most of the major cities in the country. And prior to the US DOT grant, I'd never seen such a mobilization before. Like, it was crazy good, and it motivated good behaviors, it motivated bad behaviors. But I worked with, on the first round, 33 cities across the country developing their first submissions. And then after that, I worked with 6 of the 7 cities on their final submissions. And every city had such a unique perspective, and yet they all were talking to each other. And it was interesting for me because everybody kept their own voice, even while they were sharing ideas. So they took the best that was the best for them, not necessarily the best ideas out of each other's proposals. And I think that Secretary Fox did an amazing thing by forcing everybody to have to work together, right? If you didn't work together, you didn't participate. He really did force it. I don't know that everybody was happy about that at the beginning, but what a great outcome. You know, and it forced vendors who've never worked together either, don't want to work together, don't like each other, compete every single day, to have to get in rooms together and draw it out on a piece of paper and give up the secrets and the keys to the kingdom and say, how are we going to help them? So I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, in service. I think that makes a lot of sense. Is it too Pollyanna to hope that this will be the way of smart cities in the U.S. and we'll keep going for that model?
I think you should wave your magic wand and we'll
great.
go from there.
Okay, perfect. I think that's a good idea. So what else is kind of top of mind? You're such an expert in this area. I almost want to say, what questions would you like me to ask?
Oh my goodness. Well, what about what questions they have first?
Perfect.
And then whatever they don't ask me, I'll step up.
Okay, perfect.
Do you guys have any questions?
Who has questions? We have Smart City IoT expert here.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
From a connectivity standpoint, what do you think is going to win out as we push towards the 2020, or I guess Ericsson's saying 2019 for 5G? Do you think it'll be a 5G network, which I know Ericsson's very heavily invested in? Or will you think it'd be something like LPWA or Sigfox or some other player?
Yeah, so I do think that 5G will permeate, and I think that that's a result of the larger operators going that direction.
Will it happen as soon as by 2020?
Oh, it's going to happen before 2020.
Ericsson says it is.
Oh, it is. So that's my team, it better.
Yeah.
I think that it'll be a combination of all for different uses. It would be better for me if it wasn't all of them, but I do believe it will be all of them. I think that the signs of 5G and the fastness or the speed and the efficiency of the rollout is actually surprising to me. It was originally 2020, but there's now, been announcements of demos that are happening and proofs of concept today. Some of them are happening here in the city that we're working on. I do believe that you'll see some rollouts of all the precursors to 5G coming out. So does everybody in here know the benefits of 5G? I'm assuming this is a techie crowd, you probably know.
Let's define it just high level. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but just
okay.
5G in a nutshell.
So when I ask my kids, I'm going to start there, what's 5G? First of all, they had to figure out what I did. But now that they've figured that out, that I'm the cloud is how they describe me to people. They said, I ask them all the time, what's 5G? Because I think that kids tend to be more technology literate than everybody else. And so they know more about it than I do, honestly. So better, faster, quicker, less money, and less bandwidth. But then tons of bandwidth. So that's how my son describes it to me, and he's 11. So I think that that's probably a really good description of it, actually better than I could do, because it allows you to put millions of sensors onto a network, and because they don't need a lot of bandwidth, you can fit more onto what you have. And then it also allows you to get longer battery power. It lets you be able to slice your network in different ways, and it also allows you to do what's called NB-IoT, which is a narrowband type concept, in order to take smaller segments, and by taking smaller segments you can fit more on, you can also charge less. So since sensors aren't going to be able to sustain a high cost for bandwidth, it's a way to put more on for less money. Does that make sense?
And more is coming very quickly. That's the thing that's kind of astonishing
Yes.
to me with smart cities. You're talking about cars and sensors and trash cans and almost anything that can be connected will be connected.
That is the Ericsson's motto. Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
No cheating, I promise. And it's mind-boggling to think, we're running around downtown with 4G, and sometimes that doesn't even power our mobile phones. So the next step with all this additional, taxing on the network, that 5G is not just ethereal and not just a concept, but it is happening rapidly.
Yeah.
How do cities prepare for that?
I was
Sorry,
going to
not to jump
say,
ahead of
well,
you.
no, it's actually a good issue.
Yeah.
And it's not just the city, but in partnership with your operators. So whether that be Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or CenturyLink or whoever you have in your backyard, there's 123 of them, so you could have everybody here, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so important to have that partnership with that private entity or those private entities that serve your city, because you have to think about things about densification, about potentially using fiber in different ways than you have before. How much fiber do you have? I was recently in a city, and I won't share with who, but I was recently in a city and they thought there was a lot more in the ground than they actually had once they got in there. And so they had put a lot of infrastructure in, but that infrastructure required, say, strands to each piece of hardware, and yet when they got there weren't enough strands to go for all the different pieces. So it's really, I think, a public-private partnership to make sure that that happens correctly, and that you use all the different available types of connectivity when you're looking at densification or when you're just looking at connectivity in general. I think that some things are not known all the time. There's different types of in-building solutions, there are different types of outside solutions. It could be cellular, might be a better option. It might be a radio signal that might be a better option. There's all these different options, and it's really looking at meshing them all together. It doesn't have to be one or the other, which I see a lot of cities going towards, like, okay, now it all has to be fiber, and we're going to use all this dark fiber, and then they get halfway through the project and they're like, okay, we can't afford to do it that way. So it's really, maybe there's microwaves and they're daisy chained, and then you have some fiber that's going to these pieces, and then you have all sorts of new technologies that are being invented that I can't talk about yet, that are, maybe on poles, different places, and then also using all of your street hardware in new and exciting ways. And I see this as a commonality, just like transportation is, across the world. Everybody is finding 20 different ways to use every single piece of street furniture. Trash cans have become Wi-Fi hotspots, have become, I don't know, there's all sorts of sensors in those suckers, and they save the city money by putting them in. Then you have street poles, which now can actually have two-way communication, and with 5G we'll be able to broadcast out and take sound in. So there's all these different ways of looking at your street hardware, and you really have to look at it and map it out. And you know, I don't know if you're going to use Esri or something else, but you know, you want to see here I have 2 trash cans, I have a bus stop, and that bus stop's a smart bus stop, and here's where I need my sensors, and these are the best places to put them, and then really do a true study of your entire city using that, because that's free space for you. And every single piece of your street hardware can have a I'd like to call it multimodal, but nobody's come up with a word for it yet, a multi-use type way of using it. Somebody needs to invent a word. I always want a word, and there's no word for that.
We'll invent a word.
Do you have one?
We'll just,
I bet you will invent a word.
We'll do it all together. I mean, with
Okay,
all
yes.
this brain power in the room, I'm sure we can figure it out.
Multi-use just doesn't, it sounds kind of boring. Multimodal is a fun word,
Yeah.
and multi-use
There's
is
some
boring.
alliteration there. Yeah. So it's really asking everyone to get just a little uncomfortable and look at everything that used to be in siloed as a connected opportunity to collaborate.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
that a good reframe?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun though. I just think it's a great time, you know. It's interesting, and it's no different than when I look around, like everybody has a different phone case, even though most people in the room have smartphones. That's a city, right? So everybody has different cores inside, and everybody decorates it the way they want it, but the whole basis of there is that phone is smart, right? And that's your city. So how do you want it to be decorated? What apps do you want to put on it? You know, what can we collaborate on to make it cheaper? And one of the things that I wish cities would do, and I don't see them doing it enough, is collaborating on the stuff that's expensive. So for instance, if you're talking about an operations center, almost every city has some sort of operations center. It might be for their fire, it might be for police, it might be for transportation. Some cities have like 10 different command centers for different topics. But I don't see the cities working together to invent these things and be able to then extrapolate them over 10 cities. And there's a lot of research and development. There's a lot of really smart people in every single city. And if they would just use their brain power together to come up with a solution, and then take that solution that they want to somebody like an Ericsson or my competitors or somebody else, one of the operators, what that would allow you to do is there's a build cost, right? So whatever somebody decides and whatever somebody invents, there's going to be a build cost. And that build cost spread out across 10 cities instead of us redoing it for every single city to make it unique for that particular city would really reduce the overall cost. And when like one of the cities, I don't know if it's this one, I don't remember who told me anymore, but they have 39 different systems. So if you could reduce those 39 systems into say 3, imagine just licensing costs, software costs, the manpower it takes to fix them when they break. It would really help each and every city. And that's something I just don't see the cities doing yet, and I hope that that's coming in the next wave and the next generation, is really how can we use economies of scale with the people that we go to for help, no matter who they are, in order to build it for less for each one of us.
When it begs the question around standardization, I mean, it seems like,
Yes.
especially as a corporate partner, you're trying to do business with cities across the U.S. of all sizes, not just the 10 largest. And do you think that every city should make their own way? Should we look at a statewide solution? Should we look at regional solutions? What are your thoughts on that?
It's kind of a hard one for me, because I don't really have an opinion, because I don't believe that anybody's opinion is going to come true because of the way our system is, right? So right now we have states that operate independently, and then we have cities within the state that have to follow some of the state rules, but not everything, right? So there's a lot of independence, and we're a country of independent thinkers. And we pride ourselves on our independence, and we pride ourselves on our communities. They're different than the next community.
Especially in Texas.
Right, just like we pride ourselves on our cars. I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier that, you know, your kids too in Texas, which I'm a recent resident of Texas over the last year, I see these little 2-year-olds driving down the road in their little cars, and I'm like, wow, well that guy, he's gonna his whole life want a car, because when he was 2, that was his best thing ever. So, you know, we have these ideas, and I just, no. I don't see standardization. Right? So, but what I do think is going to happen is internationally, there's a lot of people trying to put standards together on disparate issues, but transportation, I believe, will come first. I think there'll be international standards. Then we, as a community of 50 states who get to make up our own minds, will decide if we want to opt in or opt out. Once, you know, let's say US DOT or somebody like that decides that or NIST wants to do it that way. So once one of those federal agencies adopt those standards, they'll get pushed out to the states, and then the states get to say yes or no. So I don't see that changing anytime soon unless our Constitution changes, which I'm not expecting to happen. But then I also think TSR, which is Together for Safer Roads, if you guys have heard about them, they also are driving for standards. So I think transportation probably will be the first thing where there's some level setting that happens. I don't know that we will be forced to do anything here in the US, but across Europe, I think they're all going to be told this is what you're going to do, and they'll standardize first. And eventually, if we see economies and reasons for doing so, then the states will buy in.
Right.
Yeah, questions?
I have a question going back to, you were part of 6 of the submissions from those who applied for the grants, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us what you saw that you felt were some of the best ideas that came through, just to give us a sense of what are not only our own city thinking, but what are some of those other cities focused on, and what were some of their best practices?
Yeah, so most of the things that stood out for me were in the ladders of opportunity. So everybody spoke to the ladders of opportunity in each of the cities, and it was a little bit different in each city. But I saw some ideas regarding ways to have people be able to reach meaningful employment, meaningful healthcare. Those really stood out for me, and I actually think one of the ones that I'm thinking of was here. But the ability to get people who don't have access, and to make them involved in the community. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to give you something for nothing, which I think a lot of people have a problem with. It was more about, we're going to give you something that's going to enable you to be an active member of our community, and by doing so, you're going to then have pride in our community. And I'm pretty sure it was Austin's submission where it really got hit home. There was another city on the West Coast, and they did so I guess Portland, I guess I can say them straight out. And they had also similar ideas about that, as well as how do we enable people to be part of the community, to have gainful employment, to find housing. You know, in those particular scenarios, there's a lack of access to technology. And most things now are, you have to have technology to get them. There's lack of access to transportation for healthcare. So a lot of people would spend an entire day taking their parents, because multi-generational families in the same household. So instead of taking the car and taking your parent to the doctor and then coming home and then you missed an hour, it would take a whole day, because they would have to take their parent onto the bus to get to them to the doctor to get them home, and there's no sick time benefits for the jobs that they have. So they miss a day of employment. And what was said, and there was a big debate in one of the sessions I went to about, is that the right thing to do? Is that the right choice? And one of the men stood up and he said, well, look, we calculated out. We went out into the community, we talked to everybody, and we calculated out how many days of missed work that is, and what the economic impact is to our community as a result of those days missed. And that economic impact was 10 times what the cost would have been in order to get those people help just to get to the doctor. So when you look at things in that way and you look at it as an impact to your community rather than we're giving somebody something for nothing, those are the types of things I think that change people's mind about, okay, maybe that is a good thing, maybe we should be looking at that. And it's really about, we probably won't in our lifetimes, at least in my lifetime, see an end to an economic or the digital divide or any of the other divides that we see out there. But I do think that we could see an impact to people participating in meaningful ways. And with that, we could probably end some of the disenfranchised feelings that some people have and that create barriers within the communities. So those types of solutions I really liked. There's something else I'd like to go back to though, which goes along the same lines as this year. I don't know, I've probably been to 50 conferences. I mean, literally, I've been on the circuit. And so I've heard every type of idea that there is. And today in the news, there was, this will make sense to why I'm saying this right now, there was a tattoo. I don't know if any of you saw it, but the tattoo now can talk to you. It talks to your body. It talks to your doctor.
That's a reason to get a tattoo, finally.
Yes. I love it. So I thought, wow, that's a really neat thing. And the first thing I thought is, how can Ericsson get involved in that?
Nice.
Because I want to be involved in those types of things that are altering. If my parent, and recently I had one in the hospital, could have that tattoo and that would tell me and tell the doctor if anything was going wrong so we could get there, and what an amazing invention, right? So those are the types of things that I see making a difference. So looking at healthcare in that new way, but also looking at smart cities as the fun city, or the put fun back into this process. And I'm going to keep talking about it because I really think that, citizens don't always care about the technology, right? In fact, they never care about the technology. They care about, am I late? Did I get there on time? Was this fun? Was it enjoyable? Does it look good? Those types of things. And they very rarely care how we all made it happen, right? Everybody here wants to make it happen in the right way. Citizen just wants to have a good life. So if we could put more fun back into this part of technology and we could sell it to the citizens because it's fun. In Los Angeles, they have connected 10,000 trees, maybe more by now. But it's crazy. The citizens write in and talk to their trees. Their trees out front of their house, it looks wilty, it looks like it got bugs or something. They email the IP address, and the IP address says, I got your email, I see I have bugs, I'll send somebody out to spray me.
That's fantastic.
And then every once in a while, the tree will just email them after they email the tree the first time. Tree will just say, hey, do you like the air I'm giving you to breathe today? And so, but
it's
everybody
a Shel
smiles.
Silverstein book.
Yeah, it's great. But there are things like that, right? So because of that, people now are planting trees who don't have trees in their communities because they want a tree to talk to. So they say that there's been more than 100,000 trees planted as a result of this tree campaign. And all they had to do was hook up a sensor to 10,000 trees. It's actually making money.
That is a perfect smart cities story.
It's so fun.
Because it's not just tech for tech's sake, and it's not a program that's saying thou shalt plant trees and forcing people to do what they don't want to do, but it's solving the fundamental challenges of the community and engaging everyone in what a fun way.
Well, and it's a water conservation. Isn't that fun? It's a water conservation thing, though. Mm-hmm. So because more trees, more canopy, less water, less irrigation. So it hits so many different levels, and it's a great, fun use case.
I love that.
But it makes people also want to use technology then, because that now it's not as scary for them.
What other questions? Mitch?
So, machine to machine, Internet of Things, smart cities, a lot of cliches of words.
Oh, yeah.
And, in Austin, as you probably know if you now live here, it's sort of become a hub of artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, the home of Watson, all that kind of stuff. So how does artificial intelligence play into smart cities?
I think it's just at the very beginning of smart cities. I can tell you where I think it's going, if that's okay, and I'll give you one thing that I do think, and we haven't touched on it. Nobody's asked me about the data lake. I normally always get a question about the data. I think the hurdle that cognitive has is getting the data in order to be able to use it for more than real-time actioning, being able to be predictive, and being able to be cognitive. And while some sections of data are available today, there's a lot of data that's under dispute. and a lot of data points that are under dispute that I think we're going to have some time that it's going to go to court for a while so somebody can figure out who owns what. When it comes out of that process and we figure out who owns it, I think cognitive analytics are great, and I think it's really going, personally, I love the fact that my computer would tell me, hey, you know, you haven't done laundry in 2 days, and that means your yellow shorts aren't going to be ready when you normally wear them on Thursday. I mean, if I could have something, and I'm sure everybody feels that way, well, not everybody, there's people that are scared of it, but from a governmental perspective, it would be very helpful if it could not just predict, but tell us what it was predicting, right? So it's definitely going to go that way. I think that in some countries it's already going that way, but with limited data sets. And I really feel that the biggest issue about it is the fact that we're going to have a data dispute, which is really coming close to being, I mean, we're going to have it any day. I think that right now we're using universities as a cover, you know, it's our cloud cover, but I think eventually that's going to get blown up as well. So once we come through that, then I think we're going to see it first in transportation. We're going to see it in intelligence where they're already using it, but more commonplace intelligence. I also think that it will be blended with some of the other technologies that are happening right now, like drones, and there's a bunch of different technologies that I think cognitive and predictive analytics combined with those new technologies will make for some very interesting sci-fi moments in our near future. Mm-hmm. I do, and I think that some of them are happening already. They happen at shows, but not outside of the show floor. Yes, David.
I'll ask you a question I get asked a lot from people out of town. What are you hearing about Austin's perception, given the regulatory issues we've had about ride sharing and short-term rentals and using technology to solve some of the big problems, and that we have regulatory blocks? Are you seeing it, hearing it from other in your work?
I'm thinking about how to answer that.
It's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing it. I don't think you're alone. So I'm not hearing it in a negative way. It's more of a, like, for them, because we've been there. I think that, or I hope for you that it'll get resolved in a good way. But not a lot of negativity, more of a, you guys are ahead of the curve, and people are rooting for you. So there's a few cities in the country where you're really ahead. And you know, people want to see what you're going to do next and how you're going to do it, because they're modeling. And you guys are just one of the ones people always talk about it. Because you live in the city, probably people don't talk to you about yourselves, but when I'm going around, people are always talking. I mean, there's a few cities and you guys are always talked about as ahead of the curve. So I hope that whatever things are in the way, that they get removed so that you guys are able to continue and stay there.
When it begs for, again, going back to your point about the collaboration, I think with a little more conversation on the front end, I think we probably could have avoided some of those regulatory issues, because it's not just regulation for regulation's sake, but why are these things in place? What are the real concerns? What are the benefits when we get it right, and what does right mean for everybody? I think there's a happy place if everyone can just come in the room and kind of put the dukes down and focus on the solution instead of their own individual silo.
But it really isn't just Austin. I mean, honestly.
It's a challenge for all cities.
It
right?
is, and there's 3 cities I know of right now where one part of the city is holding up the other part, and there's the progressive side, and then there's the people that are digging in, and there has to be a balance, and I don't know how to overcome that. I know some really good people who go into a room and this side sits over here, it's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, and they both sit on both sides and they mediate that situation. It's kind of like a smart city mediation. It's happened quite a few times recently, and they've been able to get everybody to come to a conclusion that everybody feels bought into. Everybody feels like they lost a little bit, but everybody feels like they gained more than they lost. So in those types of situations, I've been recommending that because I think it's a pretty unique situation. It's just getting everybody being willing to come into the room.
And I like your idea about showcasing best practices as well. Other cities have done this, and maybe they didn't get it all right, but here's the piece that they really got right. So can we model that and then expand the model so other people can plug in and adopt?
Yeah. Well, so in my job, one of the things that we're looking at right now is how to showcase cities and have multiple cities showcased at the same time. So in the past, we've always tried to just be there for one person. But we're thinking that because everybody has different use cases that are best practices, it would be good for us to go to those cities and ask them to participate. And if we did that, then everybody could also see everybody else's best practices. So we're thinking it's a good idea. I'm not certain that the cities are going to feel it's a good idea since I haven't approached them yet. But we were just throwing it around. There's all these big things like CES, which you guys have all heard of, and Mobile World Congress coming up. And so you want to look at, what can you showcase? How can you showcase it? And people come to me internally all the time and say, well, can we use this city? Can we use that city? Can we use this city you're talking to? But I think how great would it be if we had 4 cities that we could showcase all at the same time to really show end-to-end city life. I'd love to have something where you woke up in the morning and you went all the way till when you went to sleep at night, and we could show the journey through the day with technology of what a city is really like, what a true ecosystem is. So if I can ever figure out how to do that in a booth, you'll see it.
Nice. Any other questions?
Can I ask about because you are coming from Ericsson and selling, of course, traditionally those equipments to the traditional operators more. But if you think about smart city and thinking about the number of sensors and the huge amount of sensors coming, do you see that those networks in the future are owned by the traditional telco operators, run by them, or do we see the same movement as we are seeing in Wi-Fi? That there are more about free networks which can be participated by the more openly?
Well, I do work for Ericsson, so I would say that I'm hoping that it'll continue to go this way for a while. But I see 2 different things happening. I see that different types of network is coming into play. So today everything is a public network basically, and you buy your piece of this network. With the advent of 5G, there'll be ways of looking at that differently. And I think we've already seen some international examples where people have created their own networks. So it's traditional in a way because it's how an operator would be today, except for now they're their own operator, those businesses or those cities or whatever. But no matter what, everybody still needs to buy the same hardware or buy the same software or something in order to create it. We also see a lot of entities wanting to provide free for their citizens or for their workers or whatever. So basically doing some sort of, like, say you have a geofence, and within that geofence you have whatever type of network you have. So we see that happening as well, and a lot of requests for that. It's just that right now it's cost prohibitive for most people, unless you're a large, say, oil and gas company or a large, electricity company or those types of things. Or, there's a few other people that have done it, but it tends to be very specific for people that need like quality of service and those types of things in the network. I think over time you'll see more and more of that, which may also be good for Ericsson though. So anybody watching from Ericsson, I'm still promoting Ericsson. So I think you'll just need a lot more equipment in a smaller space though.
Yeah, I think that if a little bit continuing, I see that it's certain kind of slowing down, that if operators get too greedy and they will not lower their subscription fees because currently the pricing would be too heavy to put the thousands of sensors if you don't get the price at the right level from the subscription point of view.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that 5G is so good, because it'll give you a smaller piece, and so the cost will be less. So that's an advantage for the operators who are going with 5G. So you can see why they'd want 5G to come faster rather than slower.
Well,
and I will tell you, they're pushing us really hard to make it as fast as possible. If I could have it today, they would be putting it up and live.
Yeah. And in that way, everybody wins. I mean, some of those independent networks, they're difficult and expensive to build. They're difficult and expensive to maintain. And
yes,
I think it sounds good on paper until you get into it, and then all of a sudden it's a quagmire, and then you're stuck with this big.
It would give me job security for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, one last question. Anyone? I think we've solved all the big challenges in the room.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
really
welcome.
Appreciate you sharing all of your insight and experience and your time and just making it here to Austin. Really
Absolutely.
Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now you guys.